Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something pretty heavy. We're diving into the source material on a philosophical stance that challenges our most basic instinct, survival.
Right.
Yeah, we're looking at extinctionism. And just to be clear up front, this isn't about predicting the end of the world. It's about exploring a specific philosophical argument. Our mission here, as always, is to unpack the sources, understand the motivations, the different flavors of this idea, and why it even exists in serious philosophical discussion. We're not taking sides, just exploring the why. Now, I imagine hearing human extinction is desirable probably makes you recoil a bit. I mean, it certainly gave me pause. It cuts right against how we value life, progress, everything, really. So, to really get our heads around it, we need to start with a super clear definition. What exactly are we talking about when we say extinctionism?
Exactly. Precision is key here. This isn't about lamenting a potential catastrophe. It's the philosophical position that humanity ceasing to exist would actually be a good thing. So, extinctionism, formally, is the belief that human extinction is morally desirable or constitutes a positive outcome. And when you dive into the texts arguing for this, the justifications tend to cluster around three main pillars. First, there are the moral reasons. This is the idea that extinction is needed to stop the sheer amount of suffering humans cause both to ourselves and to other beings. Guaranteed suffering, basically.
Okay, ending suffering, that's one pillar. What's the next?
The second is environmental reasons. This argument positions humanity as, frankly, uniquely destructive, like a planetary plague almost. So our extinction is seen as necessary to protect the Earth, to let ecosystems recover, and to save countless other species from us.
A radical environmental take. And the third?
The third is more abstract. Metaphysical reasons. This gets into the weeds about consciousness and existence itself. The argument here is that the fundamental nature of existence, with its inherent potential for pain, makes non-existence preferable.
Okay, three pillars. Moral, environmental, metaphysical. But I know a lot of people listening might immediately think of something related. Antinatalism. How is this different? That distinction feels really important.
Well, absolutely crucial. They get conflated all the time. It really boils down to scale. Antinatalism argues against reproduction. It's about the ethics of creating new life, saying it's wrong to bring someone into existence because suffering is unavoidable for that individual. It operates on that personal, individual, ethical level.
Right, don't create new potential suffering.
Precisely. Extinctionism, though, jumps to the species level. It advocates for the total disappearance of humanity. Now, the sources do note that extinctionism can look like the logical endpoint if you push antinatalist reasoning all the way. But, and this is key, most antinatalists are focused on reducing future individual harm. They don't necessarily endorse wiping out the entire species.
So antinatalism is about not starting new lives. Extinctionism is about the final end of all human life.
Got it. Okay, so let's trace this back. Where does such an extreme idea actually come from philosophically? This isn't just random pessimism, right? There's an ethical structure here. What's driving it?
Right, it's not just a feeling. There are specific philosophical engines. The sources point to four main drivers. The first one, and maybe the most intellectually demanding, is what's called suffering-focused ethics. This is heavily linked to negative utilitarianism.
Negative utilitarianism. Can you unpack that a bit? Sure. So standard utilitarianism is often about maximizing happiness, right? Negative utilitarianism flips that. It argues that minimizing suffering is far more important, ethically speaking, than maximizing happiness. And since human life inevitably involves a significant amount of suffering, think illness, conflict, loss, just basic anxiety, the only way to permanently eliminate that suffering, according to this view, is to eliminate the sufferers, the entire species.
Wow. So the argument is essentially that any potential future good, any happiness just can't outweigh the guaranteed suffering that comes with existing.
That's the core calculation, yes. It's a stark one. And this logic connects directly to the second driver, environmental ethics, specifically drawing from deep ecology.
Deep ecology. That's
Yeah.
the idea that nature has value in itself, separate from humans.
Exactly. Intrinsic value. And from that perspective, humanity looks uniquely destructive. We're the species causing mass extinctions, climate chaos, habitat destruction on a global scale. So extinction becomes almost like a necessary planetary surgery, removing the destructive agent to allow the rest of the biosphere to heal and flourish. It's about the planet's well-being, not ours.
Okay, so that shifts the focus from human suffering to planetary health. But what about the more, psychological drivers? Not everyone arguing this is a deep ecologist, surely.
No, definitely not. That brings us to the third driver, which is a kind of broader pessimism about progress. This has roots in thinkers like Schopenhauer. It's the idea that human striving itself is sort of futile and flawed. We chase desires, achieve them, feel brief satisfaction, then immediately want something else, something more.
The hedonic treadmill kind of idea.
Narrative, yeah. It argues this endless cycle doesn't lead to real, lasting fulfillment. Instead, it just breeds frustration, conflict, competition, and ultimately violence. Extinction, in this view, just stops that pointless, painful cycle, stops the wheel turning.
Okay, pessimism about our whole project. And the last one.
The last one is probably the rawest, misanthropy. This is less about complex ethical frameworks and more about a fundamental disdain for humanity itself. It focuses on our perceived inherent flaws, our capacity for cruelty, our greed, exploitation, our seeming inability to learn from history. Just a deep disillusionment with what humans are.
That misanthropy one, it feels much more emotional, less like a structured philosophical argument compared to, say, negative utilitarianism. Do the sources acknowledge that difference?
They do. Often misanthropy might provide the initial sort of gut feeling or the spark. But for extinctionism to hold up as a coherent philosophy, it generally needs the structure provided by negative utilitarianism or deep ecology. Misanthropy points out the problem, humans are terrible, but the other frameworks offer the actual justification for extinction as the proposed solution.
Right, it needs that intellectual scaffolding. Okay, so if someone actually adopts this view, how do they envision it happening? What are the practical approaches? Surely it's not usually advocating for, like, pushing a big red button.
Generally, no. The sources distinguish different forms based on the approach to action. The most common one discussed is passive extinctionism. This advocates for a gradual, voluntary decline in the human population, not through violence, but primarily through widespread antinatalism, people choosing not to have children. The classic example mentioned is the voluntary human extinction movement, VHMT. You pronounce it vehement.
VEHT, I've heard of that. Does it have any real traction, or is it more of a statement?
It's largely a philosophical statement, a thought experiment in action. The sources are clear, it's more of a conceptual movement. Their motto is basically, may we live long and die out. Its actual impact on global birth rates is negligible, but it perfectly illustrates that voluntary, nonviolent wing of the philosophy, phasing ourselves out gently.
Okay, so passive and voluntary. What's the alternative?
The opposite is active extinctionism. This would involve deliberate, maybe even rapid or forceful, actions to end humanity. But it's really important to stress the sources almost universally state that this active form is rejected on moral grounds. Even by many who might sympathize with the idea of extinction, the means of actively causing it are seen as ethically abhorrent. It's mostly a theoretical category.
That's a critical distinction. Okay, this whole idea feels incredibly modern, tied to our current anxieties. But you mentioned earlier it has deeper roots. Where does this concept, this longing for non-existence, actually connect historically?
Oh, it's definitely not new. The desire for cessation echoes in some very old traditions. Perhaps the strongest parallel is found in Buddhist thought. The ultimate goal in many Buddhist paths, nirvana, isn't heaven in the Western sense. It's often interpreted as the extinguishing of the self, the cessation of desire, suffering, and the whole cycle of rebirth, samsara. That resonates strongly with metaphysical extinctionism, the idea that non-being is preferable.
Interesting, like ending the cycle is the ultimate peace. Anywhere else?
You also see echoes in various forms of religious apocalypticism. Many religions have narratives about the end of humanity, sometimes welcomed as a divine judgment or a necessary transition. But the key difference, again, is agency. In religious views, the end typically comes from a divine power. Extinctionism frames it as a potential human ethical choice based on our own reasoning about suffering or environmental impact.
Right, chosen, not imposed. And jumping to modern philosophy, you mentioned David Benatar earlier in relation to antinatalism. How does his work feed into this, even if he's not an extinctionist himself?
Benatar's work, particularly his arguments in Better Never to Have Been, acts as a crucial modern philosophical stepping stone. His core argument is that coming into existence is always a net harm for the individual, because even the best lives contain significant suffering, whereas non-existence contains neither suffering nor pleasure. It's an asymmetry argument. While Benatar himself focuses on not creating new lives, antinatalism, extinctionists take that premise that existence is inherently harmful and apply it to the species as a whole. If existence is harm, then ending the existing source of that harm becomes the logical, albeit extreme, conclusion. His logic provides the framework.
So his argument about individual harm gets scaled up to the species level by extinctionists. Okay.
Precisely. Now, we've spent a lot of time unpacking the why for extinction, but naturally, this raises huge objections. What do the critics say? What's the case against this? This is where humanism really pushes back.
Yeah, the counter-arguments have to be powerful, right? And they really strike at the heart of whether suffering automatically trumps everything else. The first big one seems to be about the value of human culture and achievement. Critics say, look, extinctionism basically demands we ignore everything humans create: art, science, philosophy, love, kindness. We seem to be the only species capable of these things, at least that we know of. Erasing humanity means erasing all of that potential beauty and meaning from the universe. It's a total loss of something potentially unique and valuable.
Absolutely. And tied to that is the philosophical objection focusing on future potential. Critics argue that ending humanity now preemptively destroys any chance for future moral progress. Yes, we cause suffering, but we're also the only species, as far as we know, capable of recognizing that suffering and potentially fixing it on a large scale, tackling climate change, developing cures, achieving greater justice. To choose extinction is to give up on that possibility entirely. It sacrifices all potential future flourishing just to eliminate current and future pain. Many argue that's too high a price, a failure of nerve even.
It's like saying the patient is sick, so the only option is euthanasia rather than trying to find a cure.
That's a good analogy. And this leads to the practical points and a deeper paradox. Firstly, critics just point out the sheer practicality issue.
Right, like the VHMT example shows getting billions of people to voluntarily agree to stop reproducing. It's just
Right.
not realistic, is it?
Highly unlikely, to say the least. But the more profound critique is what some sources call the paradox of moral capability.
All right, what's that?
The very argument for extinctionism relies on sophisticated human moral reasoning, our ability to recognize suffering, weigh ethical costs, think beyond self-interest, consider the planet.
Uh-huh.
So the paradox is, if humans possess the very capacity for moral insight that leads to considering extinctionism, doesn't that same capacity suggest we might also be capable of using it to solve our problems and justify our survival? The species that can diagnose its own flaws might be the one capable of correction.
That's a powerful point. Our ability to even conceive of this argument might be the best argument against it. So, bringing this all together, where does this seemingly fringe philosophy actually pop up today? It feels relevant somehow to current anxieties.
It definitely resonates in several areas. You hear echoes of it in the really pessimistic corners of climate change debates. For those who believe humanity is fundamentally unwilling or unable to change course, extinctionism offers a kind of bleak, logical endpoint. It also informs some strands of eco-activism, particularly the deep green perspectives we mentioned earlier. If you truly see humanity as the primary problem for the biosphere, then, well, the conclusion draws itself, even if it's rarely stated so bluntly.
And you mentioned it has a strange interaction with existential risk studies, which seems counterintuitive because that field is all about preventing extinction.
Exactly. It acts as a crucial philosophical counterpoint. When thinkers in AI, safety, or biosecurity are arguing for massive efforts to prevent human extinction, they have to grapple with the extinctionist argument. Wait, is survival always preferable? What if the alternative to extinction is, say, a global totalitarian state enabled by AI, or unending suffering? Extinctionism forces the existential risk field to justify why survival is paramount, to articulate the positive case for humanity's future, not just the negative case against dying out. It's the ultimate foil.
Okay, so to wrap this deep dive up, what we found is that extinctionism isn't just casual doom-mongering. It's a coherent, if deeply disturbing, philosophy built on specific arguments about morality, environmental impact, and the nature of existence itself, rooted in a kind of profound despair.
That's a good summary. It stands in stark contrast to more optimistic, humanist, or progress-focused views. It's pessimism taken to its absolute limit, where non-existence becomes the proposed solution to the problem of suffering and destruction. It really forces you, the listener, to confront what you fundamentally value about being human, about life itself.
Oh.
So maybe here's something to chew on after listening. What level of suffering, what threshold of planetary damage would actually have to be crossed before the value we place on human survival starts to seem questionable? Put it the other way. What potential future good, maybe a specific scientific breakthrough, artistic achievement, or moral evolution, makes enduring all the guaranteed suffering worthwhile? Where do you draw that line? It forces you to consider the ultimate stakes.
Heavy questions indeed. We hope this dive into a really challenging philosophical space has, at the very least, helped clarify the arguments involved. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Keep thinking, keep questioning.